Right, rook and bishop's pawn versus a bishop. Rook and pawn versus a bishop is a win just most of the time anyway, without going into the specific details of whether it's a bishop's pawn or a rook's pawn. The precise scenarios where it's not a win are when it's a bishop's pawn that's very far advanced. Even then, it has to be a bishop's pawn on the side of the board that's the defending side's right corner. That is where the corner colour square is the opposite colour to the colour of the bishop square, so that's the right corner there. It would still have to be far advanced, so at the moment this is still a win for white. They're about to blunder with f6. The other scenario, which I'll cover in a different video, is when it's a rook's pawn, and that would have to be placed, I believe, either there or there. And then again it has to be in the defending side's right corner. That would also be a draw. But this video is completely about a bishop's pawn in the defending side's right corner, and how the side with the bishop draws it if white's stupid enough to push it up the board ahead of their king. This is a very easy win for white. If you just forget about bishop's pawns, forget about rook's pawns, and just follow the rule or the principle of, just like king and pawn versus a king, don't let your pawn get ahead of your king. You know, put the king ahead to guide the pawn through. If you follow that principle, this is such an easy win for white. King f6, straight away checkmate's being threatened. I mean, the black side could engineer it so that their bishop lands on e8 as a block, but white just plays a waiting move and wins the bishop. They wouldn't even need their pawn in that position. So the black king's got to run away, but as soon as it runs away, the white king can step to e7 in this case, and that pawn's just coming through. King g7, f6 check, king g6, and the white rook just comes down. What can black do other than wait? King's off control of the f7 square, and we push the pawn. And that's a very, very easy win for white. But to demonstrate something called the Del Rio position, which was a drawn... some guy called Del Rio back in the 18th century proved that this position was now drawn. Let's stupidly push that pawn on to f6. I don't think anyone would be daft enough to do that in a game. But we are going to see some examples from master level games where it's pretty clear that neither side really knew what was going on in this position. As the defending side, what you've got to know is you've got to have your bishop on this diagonal, but crucially it's got to be on a square that if the white king lands on g6, we need to be ready to jump to this diagonal with a check. Okay. And the way it gets set up is that, you know, the white rook and king might be guarding some of the squares along that a2 to g8 diagonal. There will virtually always be a square that satisfies those rules, sometimes only one square. If there's not a square that satisfies those rules, just stay on that diagonal and with your bishop, because it probably means the white king isn't ready to jump to g6. Or if there really just isn't a square, it means that the white rook's not in a very clever place, and we can afford to temporarily move our king off the f8 square to g8, say, or possibly even f7, depending on where the white rook is. The white king is ideally placed on f8, and the idea is that if the white rook delivers a check, then we just come forward to f7. And if the white rook comes back, we go back to f8. So don't move the king unless you have to. Do not move your bishop off this diagonal unless you have to check the white king on g6. The reason the white king wants to get to g6, I mean, ordinarily the white king would like to get to e6 straight away, and then that's a checkmate threat. Or checkmate but one, and clearly winning. I mean, it's similar. If the white king could get to g6, just magically become a knight there to get to g6, then it's the same threat that's going on. And that's what we're guarding against as the defending side. So let's see it. So there isn't a square on this diagonal at the moment that satisfies the criteria I talked about, so we'll just go to a2. Okay, we're not ready to jump to this diagonal because the rook's guarding the b1 square, but it's okay because the white king isn't ready to jump to move into g6 yet. So we've got some time to go somewhere else in a bit. Now, something that's worth being aware of, the entire time this is going on, And if you get onto the wrong diagonal, sadly this is the way you're going to lose the game as black, is that white might try this. White might try to just push the f-pawn, hoping that you stupidly take it. If you take it, king comes into f6, that's lost. Okay, that's a position we're going to see loads in some of the games. That's just a lost position. It's actually the end position of white finally giving up after you've done the perfect drawing technique. It's just to push the f-pawn, and all you've got to do is remember not to take it straight away, but instead come to g7. So here the player with the white pieces realises that if they play f7, you're going to play. If they play f7, you're just going to talk English eventually. The player with the white pieces realises that if they play f7, you're just going to play king g7. So they start moving their king round to the g5 square. Now, like I say, this bishop is ideally placed on this diagonal, and this king is ideally placed on f8. Okay. If we just move our king voluntarily here, then it's not ideally placed. You want it on the f8 square. And sorry, when I say that bishop's ideally placed, it's not ideally placed at the moment, because at the moment that's not a check. So just as a demonstration of how this can go wrong for the defending side, let's see king g8. Now the white king would come to f5, and the black bishop's not ready to check on that diagonal. If the black bishop was ready to deliver this check, we could get back to f8 and it would be fine. So the black bishop desperately tries to get to a place where it can deliver that check. King goes to g6, and the black bishop delivers that check, and the king goes to h6. But this is now lost. This is lost for black, because you want your bishop on that diagonal, and it needs to go back to that diagonal once it's delivered the check on this diagonal. But it needs to do so with the king on f8. And now black's got to basically play two moves in one. They need to get their king back to f8, and they need to get their bishop back on this diagonal. And they can't. Whichever one they play, white is going to win with f7. Bishop c4, we see f7 check. If king f8, the white king can come across, so that pawn has to be taken, and then the bishop's gone, and the game is gone. If instead of bishop c4, black plays king f8 here, we still play f7, and now the bishop's got to guard the king coming back to f6. So what could it think to do? So it plays bishop e4, hits the rook. Rook's got to stay on defence of the f7 pawn for now. Bishop to b1, and once the bishop's on b1, now we can come down and hit it with gain of tempo. Rook b1. What we're trying to do is get the bishop off this diagonal now, so we can bring the king in. So for example, bishop a2, bring the king in, and then we see that same black's completely busted final position. So black might instead obstinately try to stay on that diagonal with, I don't know, bishop e4, but then we can defend the f-pawn with the rook temporarily, and there's nothing black can do to stop us getting our king to f6 now. If the bishop hits the pawn, then the king comes across to g6. If instead the bishop tries to stay on this diagonal and goes bishop d3, obviously got to move the rook. If the bishop still stays on that diagonal, then the king comes to g5, and yeah, there's just nothing that black can do. The white king is coming to f6. All they might think to do is to attack the pawn straight away and then take it, but we just shift the rook, and it's that same deadly final position. So all of that shows us that in this position we haven't got time to play king g8. Okay, we've got to keep our bishop on this diagonal. It's not on the best square at the moment, actually, because we can't jump to this diagonal because the rook's guarding b1, but our king's already on the best square, which is f8. So what we should do here is just move the bishop to either c4 or d5. I think both of those are fine. e6 maybe. e6 doesn't look great because that you can't check the g6 king there. But I think you've got time to come back. I might be wrong on that. No, I am right on that. You can do bishop e6. But I wouldn't. I'd just go bishop c4. King g5. And we can just wait here. we've got to keep the bishop on this diagonal. We've got to move it to a square where it's ready to jump to this one. And I can only see one possibility there. I think I'm right in saying that bishop d5 is the only drawing move there. And I'm right. Okay, bishop d5 is the only drawing move. Rook to c7. Now where does the bishop go? It's got to stay on this diagonal, but it's got to be ready to jump to this one. I can only see one square again, which is a2, and that's correct. Bishop to at. There's the king g6. There's the check we were getting ready to make. King goes to h6. The bishop goes back to a2. Rook a7. Where does the black bishop go this time? I think there's okay. There's okay. You can go to any of those three squares. Yeah, all three of those are draws. Let's look at some actual games then. We'll start with this 1995 position. It's a game from 1995. It's black to play. We've got the 6th rank bishop's pawn, and it's in the defending side's right corner, opposite colour to the bishop. So the elements are all there for the draw. The bishop's already occupying the correct diagonal. It is ready at this time to jump to this diagonal, so it's kind of already ideally placed. The king's brilliantly placed on c8, but it's being hit. Okay. Now in the game, it was fairly clear that the player with the black pieces didn't have a clue what was going on here and played bishop c1. But bishop to g3 is okay, isn't it? Bishop g3 would be fine as a move. I think bishop e5 as well. Engine saying bishop e5. I mean, the king's guarding d4, but the point is it needs to be ready to jump to this diagonal and give a check if the king lands on b6. I think e5's okay as well. Let's go through some of the other squares and just sort of see the problem with them. If the bishop goes too close to the king, let's do c7 first of all, because it's even more obvious. I mean, that's just immediately gone. Yeah, bishop d8, and we just play a waiting move. If instead it had gone to b8, we still play this check. I mean, there's loads of winning moves here for white. King d5 with the same idea on the next move, or next move but one. So we could see king d5, bishop a7, rook h7, and then just take on a7 and come in. But in fact, we can take that bishop straight away. That's just a win. So don't go back to the king. If the bishop comes to e3 with check, this one's quite interesting because you're delivering a check. And you think, well, that's all right, because then I'll come back to the diagonal on the next go. But remember, the rook's covering f4, so you're busted. King d6. So not bishop e3, check. Like, we do want to keep it on this diagonal. And I think that's it, actually. Bishop c1 played in the game. That was the square that was needed, because that's on this diagonal, but ready to jump to this one. So in the game, bishop c1 was played. White played rook a4. King came to c7. We saw rook a7 check. King to c8. And white just played a good move here, which stops the bishop getting back onto that diagonal by covering the, I'm putting stupid arrows all over the board, by covering this this f4 square. Black played bishop d2, and now here white should just play c7. Okay, the bishop's not on that diagonal, it's not stopping c7. We might see king to b7. The white king can come to d6. Bishop a5 to try and stop this king d7. In fact, you had to attack the c-pawn. That was the only thing that did it. But this is where we see a similar example to earlier. We play a waiting move. Black has to play a waiting move. But the reason you want to draw the bishop to the b6 square is now you can play this check. King to c6. You're hitting the bishop and threatening rook g8. Everything but checkmate, but completely. When I say this everything but checkmate, is because black's always got this last minute block that does nothing. We just play a waiting move to win the bishop. So I'll keep saying everything but checkmate, even though it's checkmate. So yeah, white should just push the c-pawn. But it's sort of fairly apparent the player with the white pieces didn't know what they were doing either, and blundered outrageously with rook h7. Just letting black back onto the crucial diagonal. So neither side knew what they were doing here, and it's very difficult to know whether this next move was luck or judgment. Almost certainly luck, given the moves that followed afterwards. Bishop e3 check. That doesn't chuck away the draw because it's a check, and then you can still come to the correct diagonal. White played rook h3, and after all that hard work, this is now a drawn position. This is a true story, apparently. 1995 game. Black now played bishop g5 and resigned. So, how bizarre is that? Anyway, we didn't see much good Del Rio defensive technique in action there. This is a game from 2014. It is black to play. Try and work out which is the crucial diagonal, where you want your bishop, etc., etc., and see if you can, see if you can work out what the correct move for black to play is here. There are a couple of drawing moves, but one of them sort of gets lucky, I guess. In the game, bishop g4 was played. That is not the correct move, and now it is lost. This is the diagonal you want your bishop on, and you can just put it there. Bishop e6, king e5. This bishop has to stay on this diagonal. I mean, never mind being ready to check the white king on g6. I say never mind. I was about to say that there's only one square, but we can c4 and b3 both look all right to me. They are the only two drawing moves. Okay, so bishop c4 and bishop b3. So that would have done it. You could have also, in the original position, played bishop c8. The rook's got to stay on defense of the f-pawn. The only reason that works is that when the white rook moves to b6, for example, I'm presuming that that's still the only drawing move. It is. Okay, so you've got to get onto this diagonal. In the game, a bishop g4 was played, king to e5, bishop f3, rook a7 check, king to f8. White carried on, didn't throw away the win. White played rook c7, but again, it is bizarre that they didn't just push the f-pawn. The whole reason we need the bishop on this diagonal is so that at this point we can play king g7 and bishop takes f7 is going to follow on the next move. The bishop's not hitting f7. This is just completely gone. The king will come to g7 to prevent king f6, but you just come in. Okay, so, I mean, this is a mirror image of the last position. Here we need to play a waiting move, don't we, to force the bishop to the g6 square, but then we can play f8 equals queen and come into f6, and it's over. There's a lot of scope for white to not play the quickest route to a win. So as the white play with the white pieces, you can kind of not really understand what's going on in this position, as these players are demonstrating quite well, and yet still not throw away the win. In the last position, we saw the player, the white pieces did throw away the win because they let the bishop back onto the crucial diagonal. This is still a win because the bishop can't get to that diagonal. Bishop g4, king d5, bishop f3 check, king e5. Not sure what's going on there. Bishop g4, try again, rook c4. There seems to be a lot of just, hope moves, and it's fairly clear. And finally, white got the right idea with f7. Bishop a6, rook to h4, king g7, rook g4 check, and yeah, that would do it. And black resigned. Right, next, this is a game from 1981. It is black to play, and the player with the black pieces found the only drawing move. There's only one drawing move in this position. Can you find it? All the conditions are ripe for this to be a drawn version of rook and pawn versus bishop. We've got the king in the right corner against a sick rank bishop's pawn. Our defending side king, black side's king, is already on c8, absolutely perfect. This is the diagonal we want our bishop on, and we've got to go to the square where it gets to that diagonal, and there is only one square, which is c5. We can't go to d4 because the white king can come in and hit it, gain a tempo, and it still can't get to that diagonal. I guess we get some interesting shenanigans with the bishop dropping back, do we? But then we might see probably rook g7, just keep stopping that bishop getting onto that diagonal. I predict that would be the moves, but bishop c5 was the drawing move. King e4, and then yeah, the player with the black pieces played bishop b6 and threw away the draw. Okay, so bishop d6 was the move, and it's a draw. So bishop to b6, king d5, bishop back to f2. Now the player with the white pieces looked like they knew what they were doing. Rook g7, preventing us getting onto that correct diagonal. Bishop e3, king e5, kept preventing it. Bishop c5, and then the c-pawn got pushed. The black bishop desperately tried to come back and get into the right position. Rook f7, bishop a5, king d6, and now we saw similar to the last two positions. Waiting move to force the black bishop to b6, and then queen and come into c6 with a king. And black resigned there. Right, next. This is a game from 1974. It is black to play. I think the player with the black pieces did a reasonable job here, from memory. Can't remember. About to see it again. But yeah, what does black need to do? Decide on your next move. Pause the video if you want. I think I've just got a bit confused over what was the game and the what was actually played. So I think in the game they played bishop d2, yeah, which then throws it away. So there are two drawing moves here. One of them is bishop e1, but the simpler one is just to clear the c7 square. Just get the king back to what's going to be its ideal square anyway, c8. This would be a loss for black, by the way, if they didn't have this a pawn that was causing just enough of a distraction to... It just gives black that extra little bit of time they need to get their bishop and king into the right setup. Otherwise, this is just a win. So rook g8 check, king c7, rook g7 check. White has no reason at all now to move their rook from there, and they can just sort of carry on making inroads with their king from here, because the black bishop's not getting to the crucial diagonal. But because the black pawn's here, it's going to save black here. Okay, so the rook comes back to try and sort out that pawn, and black just pushes it. In fact, that was the only drawing move. Just got to use that pawn as a deflection. King c5, and we could actually just keep pushing the pawn. That does it. Rook a1 takes, and we're in. Or at this point, black could play king c7, check, king c8. The white rook's still got to come back and deal with this pawn. In the game, bishop d2 was played, rook g7 check, king c8, rook to g4. That's a really good move because it simultaneously attacks the a pawn, but also stops the black bishop getting to the f4. Crucial square to get onto this diagonal. Bishop to a5 was played, rook takes a4, bishop back to e1. At this point we can't play bishop c7, we need to leave the c7 square free for the king. So yeah, bishop to c1. White played rook g4, that stops the bishop returning to that diagonal with bishop g3. Black played king c7, we saw check, king c8, c-pawn got pushed, and black resigned. So yeah, in the original position, black could have drawn this. Black could have drawn this by moving their king to c8 and then using their a pawn just to give them enough time to get their bishop onto this crucial diagonal. So that's lots of different master level games where, you know, some very good players didn't really know what they were doing. I mean, if I got this position next week, I would know what I was doing and I would play this whole thing much better than any of them. Give it 6 months when I've forgotten everything that I'm talking about here, and I'm sure I'll play it just as badly as them. I guess the whole point is that at some point I'll learn everything I've been going through in my own videos and actually get quite good at this game. We'll wait and see on that one. But one player who was world champion and had obviously learnt this stuff as a kid or whatever, and then remembered it all through his career, including in this 1952 game where he's playing the black pieces, is Botvinnik. I mean, at first you've got to look at this position. It takes a while to work out what's going on. I would recommend pausing the video and deciding what would you do next if you had the black pieces here. You know, what should black play next? It's going to take a while to work out how is this related to what we were just talking about. And Botvinnik obviously had perfect knowledge of that Del Rio position and executed it brilliantly, absolutely brilliantly. And he played rook takes a5. Incredible move. Get rid of the dangerous a pawn. He knows he's about to lose the exchange. This h pawn being on the board is pretty crucial, by the way, because otherwise that would just be losing a rook, not losing the exchange. So knight g6 check, h takes g6, rook takes a5, bishop takes g4. We don't care about this pawn. That's going to go in a minute. We don't care about it. We're just going to get our bishop onto this diagonal. It's the right corner because it's the opposite colour to the bishop. And it's a bishop's pawn running out of colours on the 6th rank. You know, Botvinnik saw all of that back here and played rook takes a5. In the game, white went this way with the exchange win, the discovered check to win the exchange, bishop takes g4. And let's see how the rest of it goes, because it is just perfect. King e3, bishop e6, king f4. The bishop comes back just to be sort of away from the action, so it's already well placed, like one check away. There's nothing guarding the d3 square at the moment, for example. Rook a7. Bye-bye to the h-pawn. Off it goes. He didn't want it getting in the way, clouding things. I think it was kind of all right staying there, but, you know, why? Just get rid of it. In fact, am I even right in that? Yeah, there's plenty of drawing moves here, but just get rid of the h-pawn is one of them. King takes h4, and, yeah, just keep following the rules. Just stay on this diagonal, keep your king on f8, but be ready to jump to this one. And he just always finds the right square. Bishop b3, king g5. So I mean, you could keep looking at it, and I mean, I'm going to try and do it as well as I go for it. So this diagonal here, I reckon we can go to c4 or d5. We can also go to... Oh no, it's one of those weird situations where Lichess is giving bishop c4 twice. I don't know why. So yeah, they are the only two squares. Rook c7. So where can we go? I can see two squares there, I reckon. Hope you agree with me, which are d5 and a2. I'm right. Botvinnik chose a2. Rook to c1. Let's go again. I mean, I'm going to practice this in a minute against the engine. I can only see one square there, which is d5. There are loads of drawing moves here, and it's because the white rook has gone to a silly place. So in fact, this is one of the occasions where king g8 would work, as well as bishop to other squares, because the white rook's got to get back to play f7. So bishop d5 is also what Botvinnik played. It's what I would have just chosen to play based on, you know, learning this Del Rio position. But in fact, there were other drawing moves there because the white rook isn't very well placed. Sometimes it looks like you haven't got a square, and it's because the white rook's misplaced. So you don't have to worry about the fact that you haven't got a square, because if you haven't got a square, it's because white's not ready to go in for the kill. Just be sort of safe in that knowledge. This might be one of them, actually. Yeah, this looks like we haven't got a square, even though white's ready to go to g6. But we're okay because white's not ready. And if the white king does go to g6, our bishop's already in a good place. So this is where we can play king f7, which is what Botvinnik did. King e5. Now the white king's right out of position, so we've just got to keep the bishop on that diagonal. Check, back to f8, rook b7. Now we can probably go to a2, because the white king can't get to g6 in one move. I would choose c4, but I'm right. a2 is okay. Botvinnik went c4. Rook b4. Now it looks like we haven't got a square, so we have to go a2 because the white king's not ready to go to g6. Now we've got to come back to d5, and this time it's the only drawing move. Okay, so I definitely feel like I've got the hang of this. and there we see, no, the guy Botvinnik checked on f7. Oh yes, had to check on f7 because the rook guarding the e4 square. There's me being surprised. He didn't give away his bishop on e4. What's wrong with this former world champion? So you might have to do that if the rook's not guarding the f7 square, but guarding the square you need to get to. And then bishop back to d5, rook h4, just keep the bishop on that diagonal. Check, come to f7, check, go back to f8, and then finally his opponent sort of gave up and said, okay, I've tried everything. Let's see if you're stupid enough to take that f-pawn, which of course, I think from the move so far, you would be absolutely astonished from the quality of the black players' moves up until now if they play bishop takes f7. But of course, we just play king e7 and king g6. That was a nice little tempter, actually, king g6. What would you play here as black? Because bishop c2 would chuck away the draw, because king g7 and you can't stop f8 equals queen, never mind that your rook's going. But just stay on the pawn, just keep hitting the pawn. Rook g7, bishop back to b3, and finally he gave up, queened it, king to f6. By the way, at the end of all of that, you're then into the king in the right corner, so you've got to defend. King to e8, rook e7 check, final test, I suppose. What would you do here? And you've got to, you can't deliberately go back towards the right corner. You can't just learn, oh, that's the right corner, that's where I need to be, because king f8 would throw away the game to the rook b7, forking of the bishop and checkmate. Botvinnik played king d8 and they agreed a draw. Right, I've got one more study to go through, so feel free to just sort of skip the next part and just go on to the study. It's a study from 1996. It's actually a very interesting position. In fact, I'll show you what it looks like. So it's white to play and win in this position. We can see that all the circumstances are right. We've got the right corner going on. We've got a sick Frank bishop's pawn. But the black pieces aren't quite in the right position yet. Can white win this? That's the question. You could pause the video here and decide, or you could have that position just going on. If you've got like a chessboard near you, just grab it, set the pieces up, and if you get bored of me talking in my 50 move attempt against Stockfish to defend the Del Rio position, you can just sort of forward wind to the solution to this. But yeah, that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to practice this position as black. I'm going to attempt to draw this as black. I'm very confident I'm going to do it. I'm sad to say that it's not just going to be 50 moves, because white's going to push the pawn at the end, and you could end up seeing 100 moves here. So I don't know where we are in the YouTube video, but you could look at the time we're at now, look at the total length of this video, and go to the end if you're thinking, yeah, I really don't need to see you practice this. I've got it. I'm going to practice it myself. Great. But I'm going to practice this against Stockfish. Let's do this. Play against the computer. I will be a black. And off we go. So this is the diagonal I want to be on. We're cheating a little bit because we already know that the only place to go is c5 to get onto that diagonal. And there we are. We're on the diagonal. And now we just try and work out the square. Okay, that's a check. King c7. And now the bishop has to go back somewhere. I'm going to g3. Let's stay on this diagonal. I mean, I can't get to the e3 square at the moment, but the rook's in a silly place, so I've probably got a bit of time. Just stay on that diagonal. Whilst the rook's down there, I'm not so worried about the fact that I can't get to the right square, although that's interesting. I've only got one square to stay on that diagonal. The f2 square's covered, which is worrying me a bit, but I'll just trust that it's okay. And the rook's better on f7 than it is on f8 for some reason. It was obviously fine, because white didn't play rook f7 check. I mean, the white king's not anywhere close to being ready to get to b6 anyway. So the need to jump to this diagonal, it's just not there at the moment, is it? I'm probably putting more thought into these moves than I actually need to at this stage. Just because the white king's, there it goes, off to b6. So this move's important. I think f4 is okay, where I'm ready to jump onto that diagonal. And I think e5 is okay, where I'm also ready to jump onto this diagonal. I have no engine move to glance at and look to see if I'm right, but I'm pretty sure I am right. But this, for some bizarre reason, feels safer to me, further away from the white king. Is the white king going to go to b6? No. It's going to go back where it came from. I'll go back where I came from. Feel happier on c8 with my king. Let's keep staying on this diagonal. What next? I mean, the fact that the engine's really seems to be struggling to find moves does suggest this is an interesting one though, isn't it? There's nowhere for my bishop to go on that diagonal. Do I want to play king c7 or king b8? The problem with king b8, I'm a bit worried about this idea, but I think I can just come straight back to c8. Here we go. Not massively happy with this because my king's not on c8, but I think it's just fine because white's pieces are not on their best squares. That I'm definitely happier with. Obviously, engines are very good at working out the free move repetition. I haven't got a clue, which they always do this thing, don't they, where the rooks lands on slightly a different square to before, so it's not free move repetition. But I'm hoping at some point the computer will have run out of ideas and just push the c pawn. I'll play king b7, then I'll take it, and then we're into, I'm afraid, another 50 moves of in the right corner. I reckon g3 was fine there, but I preferred h2 because I can jump to that diagonal, even though the white king is nowhere near b6. You've seen how the engine has made no attempt to even get to b6. And if I was playing this as white, I would definitely have my king on b5, and I would be just messing around with the rook until the player with the black pieces messed up on, they need to be on this diagonal, but they need to be ready to jump to this one. If they didn't know that, they've had it, and you know you'll get them. If you just, they're not going to just get it by chance. So that's what I would do as white. Now here we go. This might be the problem situation. That king. See, rook g7 check. King goes back. That king is ready to go to b6 on the next move because rook g7 is happening with check. And that's a worry because we're not ready to jump to that diagonal. So I think this is forced. I might be wrong. I think it's a good move, whether it's forced or not. And now I'm coming back to c8. And we're back into, it's just fine. Okay. It's just a bit more entertaining. It's just a little bit more interesting now that that's got me worried. There's nowhere for my bishop to go. If I go bishop g3, I can see rook f8 check, back to f7 check, and then king b6. I think that might be lost. So I can't let that happen. I think I've got to move the king here. I shall come to... I'll come to c7, actually. Because I'm still ready to go to the d4 square with check. So I think that's okay. Right. That's not so much of a problem if I get checked there, because the black king isn't ready... The white king, sorry, isn't ready to come to b6. So there are a few things to think about there. I'm not sure if everything I said was 100% true, but I followed a path that was good enough. I don't know if it... Oh, and white's just sacked the pawn. I'm not sure if it was the only path I had to follow. I don't know how many of those were only moves, but they were moves, and they were fine to get to the draw. Yeah, king b7. Now what's it going to do? This is fine. That must be an only move. King c8 loses to king c6. And I have no other moves. So it must be that. And now we are in the right corner. And we've just got to stay on the diagonal, haven't we? So I think I'm sure that check's okay, but I think this is also fine. Yep, just keep the bishop on that diagonal. In the last video I said that I wasn't going to bother doing this one because it was the easier version of the one I then went and executed. So worried about change of direction there. Well, I don't suppose it matters. I mean, if staying on this diagonal is wrong because of this, then moving to this one's got to be equally wrong because of this. So they must both be right because they can't both be wrong. If that makes any sense at all. My axiom there was that this is a drawn position. So given it's a drawn position, what I said must be true. You're probably thinking this video is good on mute. And this is the bit where you can play rook a2 check, king b8, and then rook back to f2. And that's when I've got to do a check. That would actually pick up the rook. So the f4 square is fine for that. And the same again. Okay, rook a4 check, king b8, rook to g4, forking my bishop and checkmate, but luckily I've got bishop f2 check. The fork straight away. If I don't even need to do the check, do I? Because I can just stay on this diagonal to block the check. Just keep doing that. But it's always useful to have that check if needed. Oh no, so I did need to do it if the king had come to b8. That was the point, wasn't it? I don't know where these 50 moves started, by the way. Interesting. Does that do anything? It's not very imaginative, is it, from the engine? I mean, they should be trying a rook a7 check and coming back and hitting the bishop or something. Should be trying something like that. Here we go. What does that do? What does that achieve? Not a lot. I'm still ready to block on b8. It's not a fork, is it? I mean, I could play that to stop rook h8 check, but I just don't need to. Yeah, all the time the white king's on a6. I don't think that white's got anything imaginative going on at all. Something like this check comes back and hits the bishop. That's okay, because bishop f2 check is going to be alright. Same again. We're getting quite close to the 100 moves here. I don't know how much of the first 50 before white sacked the pawn. Is there anything wrong with that? I don't think so. Yeah, this second half of it's very, very easy to draw, isn't it? Just keep the bishop at a distance. Don't bring it into the right corner catastrophe square. I mean, now the white king's gone into a funny place. I can just presumably I can just move my bishop anywhere here. The engine's got this funny thing, hasn't it, as well, that it will just sack the rook when it gets to the 50 moves. Oh, that's it. That's the draw. Right, so done it. Anybody still there? So, on to this last thing I'm going to cover here, because this video is the best part of an hour already. This 1996 study. It's white to play, and I mean, we've seen the Del Rio position in lots of different situations, in the absolutely brilliant foresight of it and execution of it from Botvinnik. Very, very impressed by that one, I was. If you had the energy, you saw me do it as well against Stockfish, so it's obviously something that can be acquired as the skill fairly easily. And in this position here, it's reasonably clear that black's going to be able to set it up if we just sort of do conventional sensible moves, like king f2, bishop d5, king e3, king f7, come and hit the bishop. It's just completely drawn. Okay, and in fact, in the original position, white has only one winning move, and it's tactics. You know, when you've got a positional desire, something, you know, here the situation is that black's got this positional setup which we know to be drawn, and we want to try and stop them setting it up. And sometimes you can use tactics to achieve a positional objective, like, you know, black would like to get their bishop on this diagonal and do this, that and the other, but they can't actually just for this particular move because of this tactic. And the first tactic is we just push the f-pawn with check. That can't be taken because you'd win the bishop with rook h7. The bishop's slightly misplaced. So black's only got one sensible move, which is to come back to e7. Here white has only one move that that wins this position, and it is an absolute corker. It is rook d6. Bosh. Absolutely incredible move. This square and this square are directly covered by the rook. Okay, if black's going to move the bishop, this is, by the way. This square's... In fact, let's talk about moving the king first of all. If the king takes the pawn, then we fork the king and the bishop. The only other sensible square is king f8, but then we play rook d8 check. In fact, let's just see it. And then we come back and fork the king and the bishop. So black can't move the king. Black has to move the bishop. Okay, that's just true. So let's look at all the possible squares that the black bishop can go to. So this square, and this square are covered directly by the rook. This square is covered directly by the king. This square and this square and this square are indirectly covered by the rook. Okay, I'll do that one in a slightly different colour. So if a8, then we can steal queen and the rook can come to d8 check and pick up the bishop. If e4, then we can just play rook e6 check, and that rook can't be taken, so that'll pick up the bishop. What else have we got? We've got bishop to c8. I forget the colour of that one now. I think that's queen and then pick up the bishop. In fact, that was queen and then pick up the bishop as well, wasn't it? Got lost on my colour coding, but these are all covered either directly or indirectly. So the only square that the black bishop has got is h1. Everything else is covered. So bishop h1, and we just hit it. That's directly covered by the king. That's directly covered by the rook. That's directly covered by the rook. That will fail to rook d7 check. That will fail to f8 equals queen and then rook d8 check. This one fails to rook e6 check. And I think my colour codings are right this time. So the blue ones fail to f8 equals queen, and then you take the bishop with a fork. The red ones fail to an immediate fork because the rook can't be taken, and all the green ones are direct. Bishop e4, rook e6 check, the end. What a brilliant study to finish that that video on. For anyone who's still here, hope you enjoyed that. It's at the end of the day, that was just a tactics, really elegant tactics, really clever, but we need an understanding of the Del Rio position, which is just a drawn position. If I can get it, if I can find that Del Rio position, here it is, drawn position, but in that study we needed to avoid that theoretically drawn position with those beautiful tactics. And should we just go back to, what about that? The bishop has so many squares on the board, every single one of them is covered by a direct attack on it, or a fork where the king can't move, or f8 equals queen and then a fork. Brilliant. Hope everyone enjoyed that.